Put down today's date. The West and America is making a big mistake, which I think historians have to talk about it. They are so fixated on defeating Russia to the point that whatever the cost take, they don't mind. But it will come back to haunt them one day. So I've reported Germany rebuilding back their army about 3 times on this platform. But to my surprise, I saw Ruth, NATO General Secretary, supporting this idea, which is quite shocking to me. Those of you who are not familiar with history, you don't understand what I'm talking about. But those who know much about history, you understand that this is a terrible idea. Looking at what Germany did in First World War, Second World War, it's quite shocking to see today NATO supporting this idea.
Military, but I'm very happy to hear that the coalition here in Germany has now agreed, as I understand it, on a way forward. And that is very important, that there is a political agreement, political Einigung, and I think you have achieved it now in the Berlin coalition. So it's up to each nation how to deal with this, but obviously as NATO Secretary General I'm always happy when decisions are taken to get more people involved in our military.
I believe this will come back to haunt them tomorrow. Let me remind America, the same mistake was done during the Cold War. Remember, America was so fixated on defeating the Soviet Union. So during the Afghan-Soviet War, America supported Afghanistan. To be specific, the Mujahideen. They trained the Mujahideen to fight against the Soviet Union. And in the Mujahideen, there was a man called Osama bin Laden who was trained by America. So Osama bin Laden became one of the biggest terrorists who hunted America. He became one of the guys that America hated so much. But the point is, they raised Osama bin Laden in an attempt to defeat the Soviet Union. So at the time, the Afghans were fighting against the Soviet Union when they were training the Mujahideen. They didn't think about the consequences. Later, note, the Mujahideen transformed and became the Talibans. So the Mujahideen gave birth to the Talibans. So the same organization America trained later became the biggest enemy of America, and America obviously was locked up in the in the Afghan war for more than 20 years. The part of history they fail to tell you is America brought this problem upon themselves. And the same mistake is being repeated here. So because Russia is an enemy of the West today, so whatever the cost it takes to defeat Russia, they don't care. But it will come back to haunt them tomorrow. Remember, right after the end of Second World War, an ideological war erupted, which is known as the Cold War. The point is, Russia and America were not friends because these were two different ideological countries which hated each other so much. But America supported Russia to fight against Hitler. In fact, Russia was the first country to defeat Hitler, which was in the Battle of Stalingrad. They didn't like the Russians, they didn't like the Soviets because they were communists, but they decided to support them because nobody could defeat Hitler by then. Now, right after the end of Second World War, Russia became more powerful, and now America was locked up in another Cold War with the Russians. So in an attempt to defeat Germany in Second World War, they decided to support their enemy. And now, today, look at Russia. To them, Russia up to date is still a problem for America and the West. I believe you guys know the history of World War II already, right? But for the sake of those who don't know, let me touch on it some more. You see, right after Second World War, right, the Allied forces came together, mainly Britain, America, Russia, the Soviet Union, right? They came together and a treaty was signed that Germany must not rebuild back their army because Germany became very dangerous. We know what Germany did in World War I, World War II. In fact, it was Russia, mainly the Soviet Union. You know, the Soviet Union was all about Russia, right? Just like NATO. NATO is all about America. That's a fact. So it was Russia who saved the asses of everybody in Europe. Like by this time, everybody will be speaking German language by now. Right? So a treaty was signed. Don't allow Germany to rebuild back their army for the safety of all of us. But here we are. We are going to repeat a very big mistake because of Russia. Today you have a new enemy called Russia. So you want Germany to rebuild back their army. This is a catastrophic mistake, and I think historians should remind the politicians what they are doing today and how dangerous it is for their own future. One thing that history has taught us is the Germans have vengeance. These guys don't forgive. Remember, right after they defeated Germany in First World War, because of what the Allied forces did to Germany in First World War, remember, this gave birth to the Nazis. This gave birth to Hitler. And Hitler did whatever he did against the Europeans, mainly because of what they did to Germany after the Allied forces won World War I. Remember, let us not forget about that part of history. And today we see German politicians holding this same vengeance against Russia, because if not for Russia, they would have won World War II right away. That is a fact. Remember, the biggest invasion in the history of mankind, or in the history of warfare, was against the Russians, Operation Barbarossa. Hitler invaded Russia with 3 million men, close to 4 million. Operation Barbarossa is the biggest. In fact, Russia took the heavy blow for the whole of Europe. In Operation Barbarossa, at a point, the death toll was 1:15. If 15 Soviet soldiers die, 1 German soldier will die. The Russians took all these beatings, they took all the sacrifice, just for the sake of the whole of Europe to survive against Nazi. And today, look at Europe trying to support these Nazis. Hey, what direction is Europe heading towards? Yes, about Pokrovsk, this is quite shocking. We all know that it is impossible to break out of the cauldron in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. But Zelensky and Sersky is doing the unthinkable. They are trying to break out of the cauldron in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, which is quite shocking to me. It's quite shocking. In fact, this attempt, we all know the obvious outcome. So the Russians decided to destroy Ukrainian equipment. Well, check out what happened in Kupiansk, to be precise. The sad thing is, all the equipment they destroyed, these are innocent Ukrainians who were in these vehicles. That is a sad reality. So guys, something interesting is still happening. So we all thought North Korean soldiers, after the operation of Kursk, we thought North Korea was out. But to my surprise, North Koreans are still fighting in Russia. Now, even in Kursk, there are still North Koreans who are there clearing mines. So the whole report is in the Russian language, which obviously you guys don't understand Russia. So I decided to do the voiceover. So according to this report, okay, at a point in the video, the North Korea started singing. Yes, this part they started singing, and it translates to they are helping their brothers, in this war. So the North Koreans view the Russians as their brothers. This is quite interesting. By the way, listen to that part, the singing part. You listen to it yourself.
Вместе с военнослужащими Корейской народной армии впереди целый день на разминирование. И вот военнослужащие КНДР так проводят путь от расположения до места боевой работы с песней. Песня именно о них, о тех, кто выполняет свой долг вдали от родины, а в песне тоска по родным местам, слова о лидере КНДР и тех, кто ради выполнения его приказа отдал жизнь. Всю дорогу пулеметчик держит небо под прицелом. Приграничные районы Курской области киевские боевики продолжают терроризировать налетами дронов.